everybody, welcome back to my channel. I just wanted to sit down with you and do kind of a really quick little fun easy video because I haven't seen you guys in a while, and because I don't know, I got some questions that have come to me from patrons and from other places on the internets, and I thought I would do kind of a short little series. Hopefully it'll be short, hopefully it'll be interesting, and kind of a line of a trade talk sort of series wherein I attempt to answer the questions most asked of authors, or me, mostly just me. So the questions most asked, and by far the most asked question, I really think this is probably the most asked question of any sort of creative person, whether it's music or movies or writing or anything, it's very simple. Where do you get your ideas? And I'm gonna be real with you. The true answer to that question, and I believe the answer that most people would actually say, is I don't know. At least maybe that's the case for fiction authors. Now, there's plenty of obviously biographies and books out there that are about real, true stories that clearly have come from experiences that someone has lived through. But I'm really talking about fiction, and even more specifically, I should really just talk about me. Now, I feel like a lot of authors and creative types have kind of stock answers for this question, kind of like things that they say when it's brought up. And I mean, even I do. I have, sometimes I will say things like, oh, it comes from the monsters under my bed. They come out and talk to me every night. Or it comes from the demon that lives in my closet, or whatever. You know, it's just sort of these kind of strange answers that you give to satisfy the curiosity of people. Because I feel like a lot of people, let me explain. So when I look at a musician, because I have zero musical talent whatsoever, nothing. I mean, I can sing, kind of, mostly on key and pitch, mostly, but that's it. That's like the extent of it. As far as like playing an instrument or writing music, no experience, no skill, no talent. So when I hear someone sits down and just picks up an instrument, whether it be a guitar or maybe they sit down on a piano, and they just come up with a song, to me, that is magic. I have no concept of where that comes from. And I feel like a lot of people whose main avenue of creativity isn't necessarily putting stories together or putting words together in such a way, they may feel the same way. So I'm here to try to explain. Actually, I probably won't be very successful at all. I'm here to answer the question, where do my ideas come from, in the hope that perhaps it answers some sort of curiosity in someone, somewhere. Okay, all right, so let's do this. I think that they probably come, at least for me, from 3 different places. And the first place, at least for me, because I'm very challenge-oriented, shall we say, is just seeing if I can do something. Now, to be fair, back to the music thing, I have actually tried my hand at writing lyrics before. This was a long time ago in, say, high school, when everyone and their uncle had a band. Sometimes your uncle was literally in the band with you. Anyway, and I remember somebody approached me and they're like, hey, can you try your hand at writing lyrics for some songs? I'm like, well, sure. You know, I write some bad poetry. I've done some things. I have ideas for short stories. Maybe this will transition into lyrics. Maybe this can be something I can do. No, it is profoundly not something I can do. Not even a little bit. I still remember when I turned my work, if you will, into the person who'd been asking, and they reviewed it and they looked over it and they tried it and they kind of were like, listen, great try. You're not going to be offended if we don't use any of this, right? I'm like, no, it's fine. It's fine. I understand. Music is not my forte. And just because so all that to say is, just because you could try something doesn't mean you're going to be successful. So I would definitely say to keep trying various avenues of creativity until you find your thing, because there's so many types of it out there. Anyway, this is not to be a motivational video. I'm going to save that for I'm never going to do that. I should not be a motivational speaker. Anyway, so suffice to say, some of my ideas come from simply, can I do this? And the can I do this attitude is what led me to write several different things. I remember it was the first thing that led me to trying to write poetry, because I had been reading poetry when I was in, I used to do this thing when I was young, that I would take a summer and I would just study something. Yes, I know, on my own volition even. I was that kind of geek. That's how I rolled. And I remember one summer it was like how to code things. And one summer I do believe was poetry. And I was just starting to understand that poetry existed and what it was. And I was like, well, maybe I can do this. And I sat down and I was like, maybe I can write some poetry. And so I, just like every other author that has ever come before me and will ever come after me, attempted to write what is in essence bad poetry. Now, some people can write excellent poetry. Not me. Another thing that I'm not great at. But I mean, it was fun to try and it was good. And I was just kind of, can I do this? I don't know. Let's see. So that was definitely one thing. Much more successfully, I feel, happened when I was 11 and I was reading a series of books. I was actually reading a ton of stuff. I would read and read and read and read and read as a kid. It just back to back all the time, multiple stories at once, as much as I could, just like downloading it into my brain as fast as much as possible. And I was reading David Eddings novels, which are fantasy novels. I was also reading some Anne McCaffrey, some Dean Koontz, some Stephen King. There was a lot of stuff going on, but mostly I remember my first, well, it wasn't actually my first foray into kind of a high fantasy. I'd done, Tolkien and The Hobbit before, but this, for whatever reason, this particular book really jived with me. The series of books, there's two of them, called The Belgariad and The Malorian. And they had, a planet with like a map and all this really awesome detailing and stuff about the different kinds of people and the different races and where they lived and what they represented and what their cultures were like. I'm like, that is just fascinating. I wonder if I can do that. And so I sat down at my kitchen table when I was 11 years old with copy paper and markers, and I drew my first fantasy planet, affectionately known today as my first planet. I named it, I named the characters and people on it, and I've even actually started writing the story. I started writing the book probably when I was living in California, actually, and I probably have 60 or 90 pages on it, but sometimes you have to write that much to realize that a plot is bigger than you right now, and you need to do some more growing before you can tackle it. That's another thing about where ideas come from. Sometimes ideas come to you, and they're yours, and they're meant to be yours, but they are so big. They are just so big. You have no experience writing them. You have no idea why in the world. It's kind of like if a historical novel just like drops into your brain, and you're supposed to write the entire history of France in, 1486 to 1550. I mean, it's insane. So sometimes you have to kind of grow into an idea, and I definitely have some of those, and one of them is the first foray into making a planet that I ever did, and I still have it, and maybe someday I will do it, but that was much more successful because I have since made many other worlds and many other planets, and I've discovered in that exercise that I truly love world building, and it is so much fun. It is something that I just really, really enjoy. I love making my own physics and magic systems and all of it, and just figuring out how something would work, and so I love that. And the third example of seeing if I could do something was definitely fan fiction. Now, I sort of landed in fan fiction, sort of a la Alice in Wonderland, down the rabbit hole. And I remember, I think I just read an obscene amount of fan fiction. Most of it was obscene. I just read a lot of fan fiction. A lot. And I did that over the space of about a year or so. And then I started wondering, I wonder if I can do this. And I had a friend who encouraged me to try and to see what it would be like. And I did. And that's a whole other journey and a whole other story arc and a whole other video. But suffice to say, that endeavor went pretty successfully too. Turns out I can write fan fiction, and I really, really enjoyed it for a number of years. So sometimes ideas are just, I wonder if I can do that. And if I can do that, I wonder what it's like. And let's give that a go. So that is probably definitely one of the places where my ideas come from, because once you decide on doing something, it's like, I'm going to attempt to do this, then it's like the ideas and everything else just sort of fall after that. It's like deciding you're going to take up running. Well, then you realize, you know, you have to probably stretch and train, and maybe there might be some proper equipment and clothes and conditioning and good shoes and all of these other things. It's sort of like you decide to do it, and then along the way the ideas come to you as you're going. So that's how a lot of things happen for me. Let's see. The second way ideas come to me is definitely like, it's really like the composite of everything in life, right? It's this is where your experiences, books, movies, magazines, TV shows, plays, friends, people, every possible source of input definitely affects story ideas, and anything can germinate and become an idea. Everything is compost. Everything you've ever read just kind of goes into your brain, and it just sort of like see what catches, basically, see what starts to grow and what happens. When I look back at some of my older work, when I look back at my work right now, and then I go back and I think about the stories that I read and the movies and the books and the TV shows and the experiences and the people and just the places I've been and the names I like and the friends that I miss. It's just interesting about how even certain names, like if you have someone in your life that you miss, it's kind of amazing how many times you will name characters whose first initial is the same, or whose whole name is the same. It's like, I remember when I was doing my short story collection, I quickly discovered that apparently my favorite name to name any female is Rachel. I seriously had about 8 stories in that short story. Now, granted, the stories were written over a much, much broader span of time, but when I was compiling them all, I realized I'm going to have to change some of these main characters' names because they're all named Rachel and they're not all the same person. So that sort of thing kind of happens. And so I definitely see echoes and elements of that, about, you know, it's like, oh, wow, well, I mean, the David Eddings is a great example. It's like, I really liked how he incorporated character building and plotting, and it was a character-driven fantasy novel of the traditional sense. And I've never really encountered that per se, or at least not in a way that really registered with me and really resonated. So that definitely happens. There's lots of things, you know, little details, little times you do stuff. For me, it's never anything big. It's never like I have things in my life that happen and I think to myself, gosh, I'm gonna have to put that in a book. Very rarely. And when I do, they're usually very small, because contrary to popular belief and opinion, my life is rather dull. So or if it is, in the moments when it's not dull, those are not moments that I feel that I could put into a book that everyone will read and know. So there's that. So anyway, definitely the things that you've read and experienced and all of that, of course, they germinate in ideas. They affect you, they influence you. You'll find little pieces and smatterings of them everywhere. It's that part of it is very, very cool. And sometimes you discover there are themes in your writing that you don't even understand your themes, and you finally read something years later and realize my subconscious knew this, but my brain did not. And that leads me to the third place where I think ideas come from, and that is what I just kind of call the ether. And I really think that this is where a lot of things happen. Now, this is for me, and we're going to get very out there, all right? So are you ready to go with me as we get out there? Okay. So best case scenario for an idea is, I don't even know what you would call them. I mean, spirits or guides or ghosts or energies, or I have no idea. But whatever it is that artists and creative types, and everyone actually can access this, it's just that I feel like the artists and the creative types take that and then they like try to turn it into something. It's just it's just an extra step in the process. Whatever it is that we're accessing, I call it the ley line, the ether, all kinds of different names. I feel like you go there and you pull out stories, or you pull out experiences, or sometimes characters come to you. I've had that happen more than too many times to be coincidence. There's a story that I work on called Eventide, and the name of that main character, literally, I woke up and I was speaking that name. No memory of a dream, nothing like that. It was almost as if that whatever it was that was giving me that information was sitting on my bedside, explaining, like telling me a story about this person. And I woke up and I'm like, oh, this is what it is. So that's very cool. I've also had times when characters just appear in my mind. I was on the phone with a friend one night when my main character from King of Nightmare just kind of waltzed into my brain and sat down and said, and I will never forget, it was one of the lines that I do use in the book. And this is King of Nightmare, which is being published chapter by chapter over my Patreon for my patrons. And the King of Nightmare himself comes and sits down, and he's not a real pleasant critter to look at or to deal with, just for the record. But anyway, so he comes and he sits down and he says, my name is Malud Akin. In the language of fear, my name means he who walks. And then there were some other things that sort of like sounded like prophecy. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I'm pretty sure this is a character. And how do you spell Malud Akin? I have no idea. I don't even know. Does that mean something in another language? Thank God I don't think it does. And so that's how that happened. And so sometimes characters and ideas they just find you. And I think that comes from a place, in the things that we can't see, the source invisible, that is all around us all the time. Things are affecting us and interacting with us that we can't see with, because our meat suit here is rather limited. But I really believe, and I want to believe, and I want to hope, and I have personal experience that does back this up anecdotally, that ideas come to us for reasons that we may or may not understand. But if we do our level best to act as conduits and take those ideas and put them out there, that they reach the people they're meant to reach. And that is truly what storytelling is. It's kind of like this great cycle. You've got people who are alive, and then you've got the people who are no longer with us, or the things that are no longer with us, or the essences or the energies that are no longer with us. But those still affect the living. And in order to keep knowledge and information and history and human evolution kind of going, it's like they tell us these stories. And the people who are alive, who are acting as conduits for these informations and for these stories, tell them somehow, whether that's drawing it or painting it or writing it or singing it or composing it or whatever. I mean, there's so many sources. And I think that's why creative outlets, creative things, whether it be art or music or writing, we find such commonality in them. You can be from an entirely different culture and entirely different times and entirely different generations and backgrounds and everything else, and read the same story and have the same kind of emotional reaction. And I feel that's the kind of stuff that binds us. It's the human experience, and it's a regurgitation of the human experience over and over again to kind of remind us that we're not here alone, and that we are linked, and that we do matter, and that there is something greater than us. So that's my little spiel on stories. And maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's wishful thinking or rationalization or putting too much on something that is intangible and unknowable, but that's what I like to believe. I like to believe the good ones come from a place that means us well, and that our job here is to just try to tell the story to the best of our ability as we can. Yeah. So that's me. That's how I get my ideas. That's where I get my ideas. Those are some of the ideas that I have had. I have no idea if that's helpful at all. It's certainly not helpful, I feel, for anyone who's out there going, well, how do I get an idea for a story? Because there are two different things. There's the inspiration, and there's stories, right? There's stories that you have, and everybody has stories. You have stories from when you were a child. You have stories from when you were growing up. Everyone has stories. But there's a difference between having stories and writing a book. Those are two different things. One is storytelling, and one is structure. That is grammar and decisions and process, and and what perspective you want to use, and what point of view you want to use, and how many different voices you want to tell, and who is telling the story, and what details who has, and how long it's going to be, and what kind of genre it is. These are all these decisions that are creating a book. So there's creating a book, and there's telling a story, and those are different things. And so you have stories. I have no doubt, even if you don't think you have a creative bone in your body, you have stories. It's just a matter of, are you using those stories just for you? And there's nothing wrong with that. Or are you trying to figure out a way to tell those stories for whatever reason, to pass them along, to share them? And in that case, I mean, the simplest version is just storytelling. I mean, how much of human history is just oral tradition? I mean, most of our oldest records is just stories passed down from from generations that finally somebody wrote down once they had language. So storytelling is a vital part of our lives and our existence. So you have stories, it's just a matter of how you want to express them. So, and that's a whole different video series, quite frankly, how you put a book together. and I am not the expert, because the thing is, everybody writes differently, everybody puts books together differently, everybody hears stories differently. One of my favorite things about the ley line or the ether is sometimes I feel like you find artists who have gone to a similar place as you are. It's like my friend A.F. Henley. I have no doubt that Henley and I, we have homes in the same neighborhood in the ether, It's like we have visited the same place. We have seen some of the same stuff. We've been there, because Henley's words are recognizable to me in a way that's more than just the story sounds familiar, or it's the symbols Henley chooses and that kind of thing, right? So it's more than just that. And I've had it with many other authors, Maggie Stiefvater and David Eddings, and there have been many others. Stephen King has written several that I'm like, oh my God. And that's a crazy sensation when you think that perhaps you've seen some of the same crap that Stephen King has. I mean, you haven't. But the thing about it is, if you expose two authors to the exact same stimulus and tell them to write a story about it, you're going to have two entirely different stories. Even if you try to control all the parameters, it's a really interesting exercise, actually, if you've never done it before. It's like, you and your friends sit down and you're like, okay, we're going to tell the same story. And you'll tell it differently. There'll be different, there'll be different details that you'll embellish, different things that you will see, different things you want to add, different perspectives you want to use. So that's the beautiful thing about stories and the way we do things in writing and creativity. There's room for us all. Everyone has stories. It's just a matter of figuring out how you want to tell yours. So hope that, I have no idea, long rambling video does something to answer the question of where do you get your ideas? And the answer is all kinds of places, everywhere and nowhere at once, basically. And honestly, the thing that matters most to me is not where they come from, it is that they do come at all, and that I hope they never stop. So it was wonderful to sit down and chat with you guys. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Patrons are going to get to see this one first, so if you are interested in Patreon or finding out more about that, I will link everything down below. And otherwise, I will see you guys next time. If you'd like to, subscribe. If not, that's fine. And yeah, I will see you in the next video. And until then, for the love of story, have a wonderful day.